The modern Greggs sausage roll, the thing they're most famous for, is only 20% pork. Gone are the days when a sausage roll meant 100% pig meat, wrapped in freshly made pastry, when a quick stop at the bakery felt like a small comfort, simple, honest food at a fair price. But somewhere along the way, things went very, very wrong. Today, one of Britain's most familiar names on the high street, Greggs, stands as a perfect example of something many of us have sensed for a long time. Food just isn't what it used to be. That iconic sausage roll you've probably eaten 100 times, it's not even a quarter pork anymore. The steak bake, once filled with generous chunks of meat, is now mostly gravy and starch, and yet the price keeps going up. Pound by pound, bite by bite, Britons are paying more for less. There was a time when food meant something in this country, when a sausage roll was hearty, simple and satisfying, when stew was made from beef, vegetables and stock, not yeast extract, carrageenan and modified maize starch. Back then, the idea of eating chemically preserved factory-made pastries would have felt insulting, almost dystopian. But slowly, over the years, something crept into the British food system. Not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. Real ingredients were swapped out for cheaper ones. Homemade processes were replaced with industrial systems. Flavor, nutrition, and integrity were quietly traded in for profit, shelf life, and consistency. And companies like Greggs built their empire on this shift. What was once a neighborhood bakery serving the local community became a national behemoth, serving the supply chain first and the public second. Behind Greggs's cheery storefront, long-time staff describe a very different reality. Many staff privately admit the products are more McDonald's than a bakery. One employee noted feeling guilty serving this stuff to kids after seeing the high saturated fat in a Greggs pasty. Even behind the counter, team members often avoid eating it themselves. In short, those who make and sell Greggs know it's a mass-produced, processed product, a fact that flies under most customers' radar. Another hidden truth involves the price tag. Greggs keeps its savory bakes just warm enough to sell, but not hot enough to tax. In other words, Greggs intentionally bakes items and lets them cool on the shelf so they count as cold food for VAT purposes. The implication sinks in quietly. Those lukewarm sausage rolls aren't a convenience for you, but yet another way the British public are paying the price for extremely poor service. Beyond baking and tax tactics, many Greggs menu items carry surprising nutritional pitfalls. Health guidelines recommend at most 6 grams of salt and 20 grams of saturated fat per day. Yet breakfast rolls and baguettes at Greggs often deliver a huge chunk of that allowance in one sitting. For example, charity data show a single sausage roll or chicken bake contains roughly 1.6 to 1.9 grams of salt, already about 1/3 of the daily limit. Pairing a sausage roll with a typical cheese and ham baguette, around 2.7 grams of salt, would hit over 70% of your daily salt on its own. Items with bacon or sausage are especially salty. An all-day breakfast wrap, 2.5 grams, or the sausage and egg baguette, 3.6 grams, puts you halfway to the NHS salt limit before leaving the store. Saturated fat is similar. The typical sausage and bacon breakfast roll contains about 5.1 grams of saturates, approximately 26% of the 20-gram daily goal. And even products that seem healthier can hide salt and fat. Greggs' own soups and salads still contain over a gram of salt per serving, meaning low-fat or low-cal labeling can be misleading. In short, the pattern is clear. So-called everyday meals from this popular bakery can quietly deliver junk food numbers in the guise of honest food. Greggs doesn't bake food to serve, They manufacture food to ship. Every sausage roll, steak bake, or pastry begins its life not in a local kitchen, but in one of several huge industrial facilities. These are not bakeries in the traditional sense. They're closer to factories, where machines and assembly lines mass-produce food by the thousands. Pastries are formed, fillings injected, edges crimped, not by hand, but by manufacturing equipment. Everything is weighed, pressed, sealed, frozen, and palletized, not for the day, but for the month. Then begins the cold chain journey. Frozen boxes of GREGGS products are shipped to warehouses, some multi-storied, robotic, and climate-controlled, capable of holding millions of items at a time. From there, freezer trucks deliver them to every GREGGS shop in the country. When they arrive, they go straight into the in-store freezer. No prep, no assembly, and when the display tray runs low, the staff simply bake more from frozen. It's not fresh. It's freshly reheat. The ovens, the trays, the timing, all of it is designed to give customers a feeling that the food was just made. But in truth, most of it was prepared weeks ago. And it's not an accident. GREGGS has built a system based on scale, consistency, and illusion, where food looks and smells homemade, but is anything but. So why does this matter? Because when food is engineered for scale, instead of taste, nutrition, or integrity, something gets lost. And it's not just flavor, it's trust. If you thought the issue was just frozen pastry and reduced meat content, here's where things take a darker turn: the ingredients themselves. A GREGGS sausage roll is made up of nearly 30 different ingredients, including stabilizers, emulsifiers, preservatives, coloring agents, vegetable protein, and powdered binders. Things the average person would never use at home. Why? Because real ingredients don't survive mass production, freezing, transport, and reheating. So something else has to fill the gaps. Enter chemicals like sodium metabisulfite, a preservative linked to asthma in some people, carboxymethylcellulose and carrageenan, stabilizers associated with gut inflammation in various studies, palm oil, cheap and shelf-stable, but low quality and environmentally controversial, and flavoring and yeast extract, used to mimic the taste lost when real meat is reduced. And the worst part? None of this is disclosed on the menu, not on the signs, not in the ads, not on the tray labels. GREGGS doesn't say you're eating 80% filler, 20% pork. It doesn't say the steak is bulked out with modified starch and brown food dye. It doesn't say the cheese is industrial-grade emulsified fat. Because if it did, most people would think twice. Now let's talk about value, or more accurately, the disappearance of it. In 2012, a GREGGS sausage roll cost 66p. Today, £1.30, almost double. And the steak bake? Nearly £2. The sausage, bean and cheese melt? About the same. Meanwhile, inflation-adjusted food quality hasn't gone up, it's gone down. Less meat, more filler, smaller size, higher price. We are now in a reality where a sausage roll with 20% pork sells for £1.30 and most of the filling is wheat, water, and starch. A world where half the steak bake is gravy thickened with gums and emulsifiers, and nobody is told it's happening. This is what modern food corporations call value. And it's why so many people walk away from the counter wondering why they feel unsatisfied, why the food doesn't sit right, why it doesn't taste like it is to. Because it's not the food you remember. It's not just GREGGS that's changed, it's the entire landscape of British food, and GREGGS is just the symbol.
the quiet clue that something much larger is happening. Let's be clear, GREGGS didn't commit a crime. They didn't break a law. They didn't poison the public or run some secret operation.
What they did was more subtle. They eroded trust gradually through tiny compromises that were hard to notice individually. Smaller portions, cheaper ingredients, fewer real foods, quiet price hikes, carefully controlled language. Not outright lies, but illusions. The illusion of freshness, the illusion of value, the illusion of quality. People weren't supposed to notice, but they did, quietly, in the back of their minds. Mostly in the places they'd never say out loud, like in the car after leaving the shop, or halfway through a pasty that tasted a little off. Little by little, those quiet feelings spread. People started to notice things like, why is it smaller than I remember? I didn't even taste any meat in that. It smells fresh, but it doesn't feel fresh. Why is it more expensive now? Those are the cracks that a brand can't control. Because once the public starts to feel betrayed, even if they don't say it, something starts to change. Not immediately, but permanently. GREGGS didn't kill trust overnight. They slowly leaked it away. GREGGS is not the villain of this story. They're just the proof. The example of what happens when a company scales beyond what real food can survive. When supply chains require preservatives, fillers, consistency enhancers, and shortcuts. When the system isn't built around feeding people, but feeding itself. It's not just pasties and sausage rolls. It's supermarket bread that never goes stale, meat pies with no real meat, cheese that never melts, fast food that looks good in ads, but dies in the box. The real story here isn't GREGGS, it's the entire food landscape of modern Britain. GREGGS just happens to be the version that most of us grew up with, the one that felt familiar, reassuring, nostalgic, until it wasn't. And that's why this matters. Not because of pastry, but because of trust. Because the next time you walk into a place like GREGGS, or Tesco, or Costa, or any other high street chain, you won't just taste the food. You'll notice what's missing. Ingredient integrity, transparency, and respect. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. What this all adds up to is a quiet but profound revelation for viewers. The bakeries we've long trusted as innocent treats are in fact part of a food system making us unwell. GREGGS's low prices and friendly image mask a more serious story, one of processed ingredients, tax loopholes, and health impacts that customers shoulder. Learning these facts can feel like a betrayal of what we assumed about our favorite snack shops. But with that knowledge comes clarity. By understanding the reality behind their methods, we're no longer in the dark and can make genuinely informed choices moving forward.